my favorite part of the banquet. And the person I'm going to be introducing is someone I've known for a long time. And we talk about our Federation family, and it really is. Years ago, when we were a lot younger, we were working on finding ways to do childcare in our organization. A bunch of us started having kids at around the same time, and in the early 80s, and it was very interesting to have a lot of kids in the convention hall, and there was controversy about that. Can you believe that? The Federation having controversy? Anyway, back then, my kids, Marcia and John, were, well, Marcia was born in 81 and John was born in 83. And so Carla and Lucas's kids are around the same time frame. And I remember there was a time when we were in Chicago and we were playing trivia, well, we were playing Monopoly. It was actually Chicagopoly or whatever they called it. And I believe that Duncan was about 5 then, and Marcia, my daughter, and Allison McQuillan were saying to him that they would be happy to help him with the banking part of the game. And he very confidently announced that he didn't need any help. And the thing is, he didn't. It was very cool. I've never forgotten that. It was just really cool. The other thing I remember with a lot of fondness about Allison in particular was that Carla was here in 2003 at our convention in Omaha, and Allison won a door prize there that was a night at the hotel we were staying in, the Marriott, and she gave it to Brad and me. We were engaged at the time, and we very happily used that night in January of 2004, and we've now been married for 20 years and this past December, so we still remember that night fondly, and the McQuillans for making it possible for us to do that. We have, you know, at our conventions, a lot of times our kids would do things that would be helpful. A lot of the time some of the kids would babysit. Marcia used to do that, and John went along for entertainment for the kids. But also they worked, you know, and John really enjoyed working with Lucas and others on putting up the flags for the states, and he also worked with John Cheadle and others on the dog relief areas and things. And so this is what we mean partly too by our family. And I am really proud and happy to introduce a really cool member of our Federation family and a colleague and friend, the National Federation of the Blind of Oregon State President and member of the National Board, Carla McQuillan.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, Allison and Marcia were really good friends and hung out all the time. Loved seeing each other at convention. That was sweet. And Duncan was a Montessori child. Of course he knew money. So when most people think of travel, they think of sunny beaches, or a chalet in France, or a cabin in the mountains. When you say travel to blind people, yeah, it comes up with a very, very different connotation. So the author Roman Payne, in his book The Wanderess, said, travel comes from the old French word travail or travailler, which means to work, to labor, a suffering or painful effort, an arduous journey, a tormenting experience. And I gotta think to myself, was this guy blind? Now, sometimes travel mishaps are kind of self-inflicted. I went to the Colorado Center for the Blind in 2002, thank you, yes. And I went on a travel lesson one day, and Eric Woods was my instructor. And this particular day, it was just Eric, me, and Julie Deaton. Because Julie wanted to go get a cup of coffee. I was pretty new at the center. And you know, if those of you who know the Colorado Center, it's the light rail, it's walking distance to the coffee shop. So, you know, I'm under my sleep shades and I'm moving along like I know what I'm doing. We go, we get a cup of coffee, and I leave the coffee shop and we're going down the sidewalk. And I've been there a couple of times, so I know where I'm going, right? And I've got my cane in my right hand, my coffee cup in my left hand, and I am just moving along, right? Well, all along the sidewalk on the left side, there's a sign, a street sign. And so my cane was apparently in the wrong direction and didn't realize the street sign was there. So I'm walking, it's winter, I got my big heavy coat on, but it's unbuttoned because I'm walking. And I have my favorite 100% cotton white sweater. Yeah, should have seen that coming. So I'm walking along and I'm moving at a good clip. And as I'm moving, my left elbow, in which I hold my coffee, hits the post of the sign. And the coffee, because I don't stop moving when I hit the sign, right? Slams into my chest. The top pops off and a fountain of coffee covers me all over my favorite white sweater. And I'm like, I don't know, 10 paces ahead of Julie and Eric. And I made some probably pretty profane comments. And Eric says, "Got problems, boss?" Always calling me boss. And I let him know that I just got coffee all over my sweater, and he kind of chuckled. And then we went back to the center, and I went into the restroom immediately to wash out my sweater. Yes, I spent the rest of the day in a totally cold, wet sweater because I did not want it to stain, and I knew if I did not go wash it immediately, it would stain. So I washed my sweater, I put it back on, and then it gets better. So I go in, because I don't have coffee now, and I went and bought coffee. So I go into the lunchroom, and I pour myself a cup of coffee. And I walk out of the lunchroom, and I'm walking down the hallway, and one of my colleagues, Angela Fowler, I don't know if you know her, she was just hysterical, and she is at the vending machine. And as usual, this was a Kevin Worley vending machine, was never stocked properly. So, no, I'm just saying. So she's at the vending machine, and apparently what she wanted was not happening. So she's got an additional stream of profanity coming out of her mouth, which she was very good at. And I go by and I say, "Hey, Angela." She spins around and knocks the coffee out of my hand and back on my sweater. So I really can't blame anybody but myself for that tormenting experience. But it is what it is. But mostly, our travel experiences that are not particularly pleasant are because of other people, right? There's so many of these to talk about that I have placed them into 3 different categories. Planes, trains and automobiles. Wait, sorry. Okay, so we're going to start with planes. I do fly a lot for the National Federation of the Blind. And I was getting onto an aircraft. It was one of my NFB travels. I cannot tell you which one. And I get up to the front desk because they called my name. And the guy looks at me and he goes, well, because of your status, you really should be closer up in the aircraft. So I was going to seat you in the exit row, but then he looks at my cane and he says, so here's what we're going to do, because it's a pretty full flight. He says, when you get into the aircraft, you let the flight attendant know that you'd like to be reseated. And I said, okay, dutifully. I got onto the aircraft. There was some sweet 20s flight attendant standing at the door, and I said, the gentleman outside tells me that I need to be reseated. And she says, really? Why? And I said, well, because I'm in an exit row. And she goes, well, can you handle being in an exit row? And I said, sure, I'm good with that. And she goes, well, go ahead and sit, I'm fine. And I went, okay. So I go sit in the exit row, and there was an elderly couple sitting. I was at the window seat, and there was an elderly couple sitting next to me. And I sit for a minute, and then my tormentor comes down the aisle. It was an older flight attendant who said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but you can't sit here. Now, being emboldened by the fact that I now have had somebody tell me I can, I looked at her and I said, why not? And she said, well, because you're visually impaired and we can't let you sit here. And I said, why? And she said, well, it's for safety reasons. And I said, you know what? I manage a school of over 100 children, and at any given moment, I can get the attention of over 100 3 to 6-year-old children. Now, I bet you there's nobody else in this plane who can be as helpful in a situation of emergency than I can. But let me ask you one more question. Do you allow people to drink alcoholic beverages when they sit in the exit row? Ooh, that shut her down. Mark up one for the blind lady. So another trip. I am taking my staff to a Montessori conference. And I get onto the aircraft, and the flight attendant, I'm the first one on, because I'm sitting in row 1. First one on, the flight attendant literally does this spread eagle in the doorway, blocking my entrance, and says, they're supposed to tell me when people like you are getting on board! Wow! My staff are cracking up. They think this is hysterical, right? And she goes, what seat are you in? And I said, well, I'm in 1A. If you just step aside, I'd be happy to sit down. So I go and I sit down, and she comes over. Get this. Well, when we land in San Francisco, there may be stairs. Oh, no, not there. So I said, so what are you suggesting? That you'd like for me to get off the aircraft, or you're going to carry me down the stairs? So I was happy to hear that I was not the only one on the plane she had offended that day. She went to one of my staff members and said, do you need a seatbelt extender? Then she comes back to me and she says, no, not to me, to my staff. And she says, so are you taking care of her? And my teachers all go, actually, she's taking care of us. And she didn't speak to me anymore that flight. It was just fine with me. And now we move to, I know you said trains, but the story works better if we go to automobiles first. So we're gonna take those out of order. We're gonna go automobiles. So I'm at Colorado Center, and I'm on a bus, and I have my sleep shades on, of course. I'm on an independent travel route. And you know how you can sense somebody just staring at you? You don't have to see it, you just know. The guy next to me on the bus is clearly staring at me, and finally, you know, I turned and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he says, "Are you blind?" And I said, "Yes, I am," and I'd start to explain, which I always tried to do, what the sleep shades were for. Oh no, what's that on your face, was the first thing he said. And so I explained what's going on, and then he says, "Well, you don't look like you're starving." To which I'm thinking to myself, are you suggesting I'm fat, or that all blind people are poor and don't know how to eat? Right? I don't know. So then another time I went to the Washington State Convention, which we did frequently because it was close, right? So I've been at the convention all weekend, and I'm feeling pretty good. You know how you come off of a convention like this one, and you're gonna feel really good when you walk out. So I walk out the door of the hotel, I hail a cab, and the cab pulls up, and he goes, "Are you blind?" I said, "Yes, and I've just been to a convention of the National Federation of the Blind in Washington, blah, 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 blah." And he goes, "Wow, you got out that door really good." Now, not to mention that I've been there for 3 days already, and finding a door to get out of the hotel was not a tough thing to do. So I let that go. I just thought, I'm going to the train station. Get it? This is why trains have to be last. I'm going to the train station. So we're driving along, and the dude goes, "Do you know Joe somebody?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "You know, Joe blah, 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 last name, whatever it was. He's a deaf guy." I said, "No, I don't." And then he says, "Have you ever thought about speech?" Okay, I don't think he's talking about the speech on my computer. I did compete on the speech team when I was in college. I'm totally baffled, and I said, "What?" He said, "You know, speech therapy. You guys should be good at that stuff." I didn't say anymore and was just hoping we'd get to the train station quickly. And we did. But my travel tormenting and pain did not end there. So they give me a seat assignment on the train, and I go sit down. And the woman sitting immediately next to me turns to me and says, "Hi, are you a student?" Okay, let me tell you something. I'm 40 years old. I am wearing a suit with stockings and high-heel shoes because I just came from my convention. There is nothing about me that says I'm a student. So I'm confused, and I say no, and I explain to her what I do for a living. I run Montessori schools. I just came from this convention. And she goes, "Oh, are you married?" A little personal. I said, yes, I am. And she says, "Oh, good for you." And then she says, "Do you have children?" Now, okay, I have 2 children. One of them at the time was the most delightful 8-year-old, curious about everything, loved the world. I also had a 14-year-old daughter. And if you think I have attitude? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So what runs through my mind is the National Convention in Detroit in 2004. Allison was 11 years old, and she's in an elevator bank. I hear this from one of my dear friends. She's in an elevator bank. You know, any of you who were at the Detroit hotel, the elevators were awful. And so there's crowds of people at the end of a session waiting for an elevator. Elevator comes, it's packed full, like every National Convention elevator is. And the doors start to close, and someone pushes the up button, and the doors pop open again. And everybody inside groans, and the doors start to close, and the same person pushes the button again, and they pop open, and everybody's now really angry. And my 11-year-old daughter looks at this man and says, if you would stop pushing the button, the elevator would go, and then we can get another one. Do you know who that person was? Tony Cobb. For those of you who do not know, this is Dr. Jernigan's son-in-law. And I heard this story and I'm mortified. So here I'm thinking, she says, do you have children? I say yes, and she says, isn't that great? And I said, sometimes. So then she says to me, I'm trying to fall asleep, right? I'm done with this one. But I try to educate. Nancy, I hear you. I educate all the time. I love going into classrooms. But I gotta tell you, this woman wasn't learning. There was nothing I could do. I'm done with her. So I closed my eyes and feigned sleep. But apparently, subtlety was not something in which this woman dabbled. So she taps me on the shoulder and she says, excuse me. Yes. You are blind, right? I thought we had established this earlier, but apparently. I said, yes. And she says, well, it's just that you seem so normal. There it was. There it was. You know, my husband here, Lucas, was retired now, speech communication instructor. And one of the things that he does in fact, I have him do this when we have teacher trainings, is about confirming and disconfirming messages. Meaning that, you know, what you say in a number of ways can either uplift the person you're speaking to or tear them down. And disconfirming messages, I love this. Disconfirming messages are only disconfirming to the extent that the recipient perceives them to be. Let me say that again, because this is important. If you don't let it get to you, it can't. You are in charge of whether or not you let those ugly comments get into your soul. So in 2016, President Riccobono came to me and asked if I would run for the national board. And I said, okay, I was on the national board from 1998 until 2006. And I stepped down for my presidency because my business was so huge and felt like I was failing at both my business and the National Federation of the Blind of Oregon. So I stepped down, and then in 2016, President Riccobono asked if I would run for the board, and I thought, why? And he said, well, we're looking for forward-thinking people. And I thought, as I'm writing this speech, everything I have just talked to you about happened over 20 years ago. Some of it 30 years ago. Forward thinking, Okay, I'd like to believe I am. But then I have to think, what is it that's different now that I don't have those same stories to tell? You know, journalist Benjamin Dover, his friends called him Ben, said, oh, I love it. You know what? I told that joke in New Jersey. Everybody got it right away. Sometimes people don't get it at all. So thank you for laughing at that. I appreciate that. Benjamin Dover said, it's okay to look back. It's okay to look back as long as you don't stare. Right? Like that? I like that. There's a song by Dawes, which is a group that we like very much, that says, the only point in charts and maps, the only point in looking back is to see how far we've come. Woo! So, I think we've come a long way. A few years ago, we took our Bell students to the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Now, it's a children's museum, mostly hands-on, which is good, but there were no sighted people in our crowd. We had our 5 students, and we had 3 blind adults. And we came in, I was expecting to have trouble. In fact, it would have been a great lesson for the kids. But we went all the way through that museum, and nobody put a hand on us, nobody guided us, they weren't hovering, except for one individual. Probably a retired guy volunteering in his 70s or 80s. And we were in a little group, and he came up and grabbed my arm. And I said, please don't touch me. Well, you say that to a man when you're a woman, whew, they can't get their hands off of you fast enough. I was polite, and then he backed away, and that was the only issue we had. What's changed? I'm NFB? I'll get there. The other thing, we talk about travel, people anticipating where you think you need to be, right? So we're in Orlando one year. I run NFB camp. It was actually at Shingle Creek. And the NFB camp rooms, once you get down that hallway, were to the left and up a few stairs, and the general sessions were to the right and down an escalator. And you know, we got these helpful UPS people, which were the worst this particular year of any year I remember. So I have to be at NFB camp 30 minutes before sessions begin to check people in, and 30 minutes after. So I'm going to NFB camp probably about, 40 minutes before sessions begin. But everybody else is going to sessions. So I got one of these helpful volunteers telling me I'm going the wrong way. I tried to ignore her. This is like the last day of convention, so I've been doing this for 6 days now. She just keeps going. And at one point she's shouting at me that I'm going the wrong way. And it's the end of the week. You know how you feel at the end of the week? I turned around and I swear to you, I shouted back at her and I said, I'm not going to the session yet! And she backed off and left me alone. Imagine that, crazy, crazy blind woman. I think the difference is the National Federation of the Blind. And I think a big chunk of it is training centers. Look how we have raised our own people to learn what they need to learn to be independent in the world so we don't look so helpful anymore. Now, I say maybe it's the younger generation that recognizes, and I had somebody say, well, I think the younger generation just doesn't give a crap. So, right? But I think it's the level of confidence, for the most part, that tells people, I'm okay. You don't need to mess with me. And if I do need help, I'm gonna let you know. And I think that is what the National Federation of the Blind has done over the past, 84 years now. I think we have made a difference. Slow, yes. Do we have farther to go? Yes. But I do believe that it is what the work we have done. And I am filled with love, hope, and energy for participating in the National Federation of the Blind, because my contributions make a difference to me and to others. And I can celebrate my successes with my Federation family. Instead of using the word travel, maybe we should switch to wandering. Roman Payne, again, in his book, The Wanderess, said, "Wandering is the act of a child. It is the passion of a genius. It is the discovery of the soul." My Federation family, let the flame of our passions reflect on our raised expectations as we wander together to let the child and the genius that resides within us move ever closer to the discovery of our souls and the realization of our dreams. Thank you.